It's called The Amazing Spider-Man. It's a reboot of a kind of well-known franchise. But Justin, why don't you start off and tell us what it's about?
All right, well, this film is a reboot of the entire Spider-Man franchise, so we're going to get to see Peter Parker's origin story all over again with some changes made for this film, different from the first one, so you actually have reason to go to the theater and see it as opposed to renting Spider-Man 1 and rewatching it. In this movie, a young Peter Parker is playing hide and seek with his scientist father when he discovers that his father's study has been broken into. His father gathers up the documents, and Peter's parents take him to live with his Aunt May and Uncle Ben, and then they just mysteriously depart. Years later, a teenage Peter attends Midtown Science High School, where, of course, he's bullied, as we've all seen before. But in this film, his heart's desire is Gwen Stacy, who's played, I think, magnificently by Emma Stone. At home, Peter finds his father's papers in a bag in his aunt and uncle's basement, and this starts a little search for his father, what his father was up to, what happened, why did he leave. There's all sorts of unresolved issues. And he finds out that his father was a scientist who worked at Oscorp with another scientist who's still alive and currently working there. So he goes to Oscorp to find the scientist Kirk Connors to find out maybe what happened with his father while he's there. Of course, Emma Stone is an intern there at Oscorp. But Peter Parker talks with Kirk Connors, finds out that they were working on a project of animal splicing of DNA. And you know the rest of the story. Peter gets bitten by a spider, gets powers. In this film, the main bad guy is not Norman Osborn, nor is it the Green Goblin this time. It's Kirk Connors as the Lizard. Lots of fighting ensues. Tussle. I think that really kind of sets the stage for this one. The first film came out in like 2002. Now it's 2012. It's only been 10 years. The corpse ain't even cold yet. What do you guys think about this film, and how do you feel it compares to Sam Raimi's original Spider-Man?
Let Scott go first.
I like it. I think there's a lot less, and I hate to use the word silliness, but there's a lot of goofy moments in the original Spider-Man, which, don't get me wrong, I loved. And I love the goofy moments on it, but I felt that this one took a little bit more serious, even though it had some humor built into it, that I found refreshing. Not as refreshing as a Batman reboot, but that's my take.
I thought Andrew Garfield nailed Peter Parker in a way that I don't think Tobey Maguire quite did. I like Tobey Maguire a lot. I just think Andrew Garfield did a better job overall. Mm-hmm. Because of his pain and sarcasm was a little bit more real than it was in the previous movies, I guess. Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy was finally a real character. I'm not a fan of Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane in the original movies, even though I love the first movie. She's really the one character anybody else could have played or not have been fine. Mm-hmm. I think, in terms of the characters, it's much deeper than the first movie. I think the action's very solid and everything else. But this is a very good launch film for this particular direction that they're trying to set. It is trying to be like The Dark Spider to an extent, where it's trying to be a more realistic view of that world. And the thing that I guess is kind of irritating me is you hear people talking, oh, this one's better than the original Spider-Man. No, I don't agree with that at all. I think the original movie was perfect for what it was trying to be, which it was trying to be a very comic booky version of Spider-Man. And it was. I mean, they nailed that character perfect. And I'm sorry, the effects in that movie still hold to this day, for the most part. The story holds for the most part. I mean, they made the Green Goblin, who by design is a ridiculous looking character, and made it believable in the movie. I just think that they did a very good job in the first movie, and I think it's really sad that people think they should take their shots at the original one with this one. It's a different kind of movie. It's really not the same kind of movie. Tonally, it's a very different movie.
Agreed.
Very different. But the character-wise, some things in this movie I think are just much better. In the original movie, the Uncle Ben storyline followed the comic books much better. This is very much a retelling of it, which means we're going to change shit that you're really familiar with, so it seems all fresh and new. And I actually think it works. I was much more emotionally invested in Uncle Ben in this movie, even though I thought Cliff Robertson was great in the original one. I almost cried when Uncle Ben, what happens to him, just because they did a very good job of establishing the characters and making you feel, you know what, they have a really close relationship, honest thing, it's normal teen shit. then this happens and his life's destroyed. And I believed it. Whereas in the first movie, it just seemed because they were going for it, very comic booky. They weren't trying to make your gut hurt with emotion. They were just trying to tell a story and also make kids happy. It was a fun movie. The first movie was a very fun movie. Mm-hmm. This is very much a realistic film, I guess. So I like both of them. I think they're both very good. The action, I think, is probably better in the first movie, just because there's a lot more of it. I think the first hour is kind of slow in this movie. Mm-hmm. But I bought the characters more. That's my take on the comparison between the two movies. What about you, Justin?
I think this film works better for me, and it's entirely because of the two leads. I don't want to take anything away from Tobey Maguire. The only thing I really never cared about with his performance is he was so much more gee golly whiz in his portrayal of Peter Parker, whereas Andrew Garfield was a more sardonic character, and I think Peter Parker is a more sarcastic kind of character, and that performance works better for me than Tobey Maguire's did. And yeah, Emma Stone is just head and shoulders better than Kirsten Dunst. I hate to take anything away from the poor girl because she was really good in Interview with the Vampire, but everything after that has just been diminishing. Nothing she's done has really been all that special. Emma Stone, though, brings an intelligence to her performances and a believability to her characters that's so much better. So because of those two, I think they alone raise this movie above the other one. But I agree that this film doesn't have nearly as much action as the original Spider-Man does. And when it does have action, I think this film's action is better. I just don't think it has nearly enough of it. But the one thing it misses that the original one had was that sense of Peter Parker having some fun with his abilities. And you really only get one scene where Andrew Garfield is kind of testing it out and giving a couple of woohoos as he's swinging. But Tobey Maguire his character had much more fun being Spider-Man, and you got to see more of him just swinging around the city. But all in all, I think it's tonally more interesting, and I think the characters are played much more deftly in this one. So that's as far as a comparison between the two. I think this one wins out, but it's not by a huge margin, and I think most people's whatever animosity they may have for the original is entirely because of that shitty third film. I think it unfortunately tainted everything that came before it.
I think I enjoyed the original Spider-Man when I saw it in the theater than I did watching this one, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the whole concept of swinging through the city was brand new back in 2002. Yeah. You know, it was like 2002 when that came out. That whole concept was brand new, and I think Spider-Man really kind of springboarded the comic book series into what it is today. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Comic book films, yes.
I'm sorry, comic book films, yes. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why I enjoyed that so much, because it was the first time I had seen that kind of comic book action on the big screen. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to. I thought I was going to, because I've been getting a lot of people talking to me about this. I'm not even going to bother seeing it. It's too soon for a reboot, and all these reasons why I'm not going to go see it. And so I kind of went in with it not expecting a whole lot. I had so much fun. There were so many cool moments, so many interesting ways that they wrote with the characters and the interactions that had to them that even though they were somewhat cliched comic book, they took a little bit of twist in them that made them seem fresh, and I really appreciated that. It did drag a little bit at the beginning, but I'm a character development kind of guy anyway, so it didn't bother me too much. It would affect my rewatching, but I had so much fun. I was ready to stand up and cheer.
I will say one of the biggest things, and as anybody that's listened before, this is my favorite comic book character by far. I grew up with Spider-Man. I even liked the shitty Nicholas Hammond TV show that was on in the 70s. I mean, just anything with Spider-Man. I had Spider-Man underwear. I think I still do. I think I'm wearing them currently. Sheets, the whole deal. I mean, I love Spider-Man. Love him. So the character to me is very near and dear to my heart. I like the origin story. I don't think it has to adhere to that. I actually like the emotional resonance of the story in this film better, with the Uncle Ben, like I was saying. So that actually surprised the hell out of me, because I'm so stuck on that character that's a big part of who that character is. There's two things that they left out. One that I think is fantastic, and one that I think is really just stupid. The first one is the web shooters. Okay, when the original came out, everybody made a big deal because they're ditching the fact that Peter Parker has homemade web shooters as opposed to now he's going to have them. Basically, they're part of who he is. They're part of his DNA. I never liked that idea because of what I was afraid was going to happen, which is exactly what happened in the film, is that in the comic books, Peter Parker is basically a genius. He's a genius. I mean, the kid is a scientific genius. You never really get that vibe from the film, the earlier films. I mean, you get that he's a smart kid and he's a geek, but never that he's borderline genius, I don't think. Mm-hmm. In this film, I think you get that. I mean, you get that he understands what's going on. I think in the first film, the original series, they kind of alluded to it, but Sam Raimi was more interested in having fun, which is fine. It worked great for that series. That's something that always bothered me because I really wanted that aspect. And I think by bringing back the fact that he makes the web shooters and, he designs it and basically it brings his character a little more into focus than the original films. The one thing that just bugs this is a huge thing for me because I'm a fan of the comic books, is with great power comes great responsibility. Is not in the movie at all.
I was waiting for it too.
They do mention, you got to have responsibility, and I was waiting for it. And to me, that is the one thing that you can't leave out of that series, personally. Because to me, that says everything about the character that he becomes in the entire series. And the fact that they left that out, now maybe they're going to go to it, like maybe that's the last line of the third movie. I have no idea. It should have been part of this series. It should have been part of the origin story. I don't care how many times they reboot it. It should always be there because it's the essence of who the character is. And that was a real big, seriously? Fuck you. I mean, that was really how I felt about it because I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. I don't know how you guys felt about that, and that's not a spoiler. I'm just saying if you're looking for it, you're not going to hear it.
Right.
So.
I was glad they didn't put it in there, to be honest. And the reason
I was
glad
can mud fight. We'll mud fight.
I'm glad they didn't because as much as that phrase is a part of the character, that phrase has also become a little bit of a joke. And I don't mean that in a really bad way, but everybody says it. And everybody says it because it became such a part of the zeitgeist, a part of our culture. And to go back to that exact wording could have worked for them with some people, and it really could have worked against them with some audiences. I felt like the sentiment was there. I mean, they basically said it. They just used different words. And I think that the way Uncle Ben explained it in this movie, I thought his explanation worked better than just the phrase, with great power comes great responsibility. So I was fine with it and actually preferred the way they did it. But as a diehard fan, it would be like if they redid Star Wars and didn't put in May the Force be with you. I could see people getting up in arms about it.
If they switched it to, here, take some Force, I don't think you'd be so thrilled with it.
But I wish they'd have just would have put more action in it, because when he was going off and running up walls and flipping around and jumping, it was really a lot of fun. I mean, my brother even made a joke at one point after he did the running and jumping and flipping and going up walls and across roofs. He was sitting next to me in the theater and he was like, Peter Parker, they should call him Peter Parkour.
Oh,
wow.
And it was all I could do. Not to ruin everybody's time by just busting a gut laughing, but it looked fantastic. And I just wish they would have had more of it because it looked great.
And to wrap the review up, one thing we haven't talked a lot about was the Lizard. And I will be honest with you, the Lizard is a very minor character in this. But the Lizard wasn't as big a part of it. But when he was on, the Lizard was a cool character. I thought the CGI was actually pretty neat for the Lizard. So that's really all I have to say about that. I'll wrap up mine. I still prefer the original film to this one, as it's just simply more fun. But this was very good. And for somebody that was going in a hater, because all I was worried about was like, oh, it's going to be the Dark Spider and this is going to suck balls. I'm on board for sequels. I actually liked it. Andrew Garfield, much better than Tobey Maguire, just because he made the role his own, which is pretty impressive seeing the last movie was 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I give it 8.5 out of 10.
I enjoyed this movie more than I thought I was going to. I was ready to go watch the second time right after it was done, and that doesn't happen a whole lot for me. I gave it a 9 out of 10. $9 out of 10.
Ooh. And Justin?
Wow. I think all in all, the film is better than the first, though I wish they would have trimmed about 20, 30 minutes out of the middle. It dragged a little too much. And for some reason, it seems like a lot of films these days suffer from that middle sag. I'll give it 8.5 out of 10.